I was 11 years old at the time. I didn't have a father, but I had a stepfather. My mother and I stayed in our two-room apartment, and he left on a business trip to another city. We went to bed, and then it all started. I woke up in the middle of the night. I don't know exactly what time it was. I woke up in terror. There was a shadow over my bed. It was a human silhouette, slightly elongated. Its head was oval, its shoulders narrow, and the silhouette itself seemed to be elongated a bit. It stood motionless, but I could feel that it was looking at me. I was scared out of my wits, and I couldn't think of anything better to do than hide under the covers. I wanted to scream and call my mother for help, but I thought she wouldn't believe me. I don't know how much time passed, but I decided to look out from under the blanket. When I pulled the blanket away from my face, I saw that the silhouette had disappeared somewhere. I still don't know how I had the courage to go out into the hallway, but that's what I did. In the darkness, I fumbled for my toy gun and decided to look into my mother's room. For some reason, I thought she was in danger. What happened next was unimaginable. After taking a few steps down the corridor, I could already see into my mother's open room. I must have been so frightened that there were already 3 of these silhouettes standing over my mother's couch. The one elongated. The second one, it had human legs, but its head was just huge. You could see its teeth open mouth. I don't even know what to call them. Paws or something, instead of front arms. And he was leaning over my mother. The third one was on all fours, just as motionless as the outstretched one. I ran like a bullet into my room and jumped back under the covers, shaking like an aspen leaf. I was so scared that I decided to scream and call my mother for help. And I screamed. I called for her several times, but she never came. After lying there for a while longer, I decided to go to her to see if everything was all right. But as soon as I got out from under the covers, I saw that they were standing next to my bed. The 3 creatures that had been next to my mother were already beside me, all staring at me as one. For the first time, this stretched out one became animated. He began to walk around the apartment. First, he came a little closer to me and seemed to bow his head, looking into my eyes. Then he went out into the hallway and went to my mother, I realized. Then came back again and froze again. The other 2 just stood there and did nothing. All this time I was watching what was going on. At some point I thought I was dreaming, and I decided to turn away from them and cover myself with a blanket. I wish I hadn't done that. When I turned to the wall, I saw my reflection on it. On a wall with no mirrors, just plain paper wallpaper, I saw myself. Only it wasn't me. When the reflection abruptly opened its eyes, I saw that they were yellow, like a cat's. It stared at me with a blank stare, and then began to rise somewhere upward. I squeezed my eyes shut and fell into oblivion. I woke up at dawn, as if nothing had happened. The first thing I did was go to check on my mother. She was lying on her couch as if nothing. You can believe it, you can disbelieve it. I always hated mirrors. I've hated them even more since then. One day, just one day separates me from my birthday. It's amazing. And it could have ended worse. The night, sometime after 12. I wasn't alone in the apartment. My dad and my sleepover friend were with me. Only my dad was in the other room. We were watching TV, and the door to our room was half open. It was a tiny opening. Somehow my gaze fell unintentionally on the mirror. I felt as if someone was watching us. But instead of a shadow, I found nothing there. At first I thought that Daddy was standing in the doorway of his room and wanted to go for a smoke, so I didn't pay any attention to the shadow. But after a few minutes, I looked in the mirror again. The same thing. This was beginning to alarm me. Standing in the doorway for so long was unlikely. Soon, after staring at the mirror for a long time, I raised myself up on my elbows, and the shadow immediately disappeared. It seemed more than strange to me, but a friend who called out to me made me turn my head toward her, to look away from the mirror. I lay back down again, but I couldn't keep my eyes open for long. A few minutes of staring, and a hand suddenly appeared in the doorway, a human hand, without any otherworldly sign. Its gesture was as if it called, beckoned, wanted to take away, but just as instantly disappeared, leaving no trace. I almost choked with fear when I saw such a thing. No, I didn't lose consciousness, but it took me a long time to catch my breath. But something beckoned me to look in the mirror, and I even got up and sat on the bed. For a long time I kept looking in the mirror before I almost fainted. Now there was a head in the opening, a dog's head, covered in leather. About the height of this something was human, the usual 6 feet tall, and the hand gesture was the same as the previous one. It was scary, really scary. I was brought to my senses again for a long time, and I did not look in that mirror again. Instead, I just asked my father if I thought it was him who came to see us. But no, he was lying there watching television and did not leave his room at all that night. In the morning, my friend and I concluded that it might have been the Egyptian god of death, Anubis. Apparently, someone didn't really want my 16th birthday coming up. The next morning, I had a heart attack. Coincidence or not, I still don't know. My friend's grandmother is a very prominent woman with hair as white as snow and styled in a high updo. Always well dressed, it's hard not to notice her. And always, no matter how many years had passed, we said hello to her. Although her granddaughter has not lived in our yard for a long time. They have an expensive large apartment, and we live in the city center. Her husband has a high position and her car always takes her to work. In general, there is reason to be jealous. But in fact, this woman is very intelligent and kind. Here is what she said. As it always happens, a man who is not old enough to have money is always an object for women with certain goals, usually much younger than his lawful wife. It so happened that the grandmother of my friend began to notice the strange behavior of her husband. He would go out after work or leave for a business meeting, etc., and then one day he got very sick. With severe pain, he was taken away by ambulance, and the woman was confronted with the fact that her husband needs a long treatment for who knows what. The doctors could not diagnose him right away, and he was sent for a long examination. The weeks went by, but her husband did not get better. After her husband was taken to the hospital, it became difficult to be in their apartment. From somewhere there was an intolerable stench. Some silhouettes were seen, and her grandmother also told that one day she was sitting alone at home watching television. Suddenly she thought she saw something run past her, and then again, something rather large, maybe the size of a cat. Yes, it was also spinning in a wiggle. The rug it had crawled underneath seemed to have been moved by the wind. After that, she became so scared that the unfortunate woman decided to turn to a man with psychic ability, commonly called a witch doctor. She was immediately recommended a reliable person, not someone who advertises in the newspaper, but a real village hermit witch doctor, who lives somewhere in the region and to whom it is quite difficult to get. If it weren't for acquaintances, she wouldn't even know where he lived. Eerily, when she arrived at his house, the sorcerer was waiting for her on the doorstep, as if he already knew of the visitor's arrival. It was clear from his first words that he knew everything. Here is what he said. It's all your husband's mistress's fault. He brought her home while you were away and she, I can see it, put something in the pillows. Look in the pillows. That's where the cause of everything is. If you do nothing, your husband will die, and you will have no life in this apartment. What you will find in pillows, take in a deaf bag on the vacant place where people don't walk and burn, invoking words which I shall teach you. Go away without looking back. The woman went home in shock, and the first thing she did was to rip open the pillows on which she and her husband slept. Her astonishment and fear were unparalleled. The pillows were all neatly cut inside, and there were some sort of memorial wreaths, dried flowers, etc. stuffed inside. She wrapped it all in bags, as the sorcerer had said, without touching it with her hands, and carried it to the vacant lot. When the woman threw it into the fire, it did not want to burn at first. But when she began to say special words, the filth immediately crackled and smoke began to billow. She decided to leave at once, but her legs did not obey her. She could not move, that's all. Then she began to repeat her grandfather's words again, and it was as if she had let go. She left without once looking back. After that, everything stopped in the apartment. Grandpa got better and was discharged. How they made up is another story. But my friend's grandmother soon found out about the woman her husband was having an affair with, and that she was seriously ill.